Hey there, it's Dr. Jennifer Stoll from Cimarron Global Solutions, and I'm back with another deep dive on our 2025 Resident Sentiment Towards Sporting Event Data, our study that we conducted with our friends over at Longwoods International. And I got to tell you, before we even jump into this topic, which I think is going to be a very interesting topic, very informative for the audience, if you haven't checked out our previous ones, specifically our last one, you probably want to do that. And we've got it easy for you here. This navy blue button that says more data deep dives. Click on that and it'll give you a list of all of them. Every single one of them is linked. But this is the one I want to draw your attention to right here, the third one down. This is our generational perception of cheating and corruption in sports. And I don't know what it was, but a few weeks ago, I was reading more and more about sports wagering and some of the things going on. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to veer off course, even off of our actual schedule that we had for these. And I'm going to talk about a topic that most people don't talk about in the industry, and that's residents' perceptions, or in our case, general public perceptions of cheating and corruption in sports. And oh my gosh, was that a timely topic, because this went out a couple of weeks before news broke of the NBA's sports betting, rigging, scheme that seems to be getting bigger by the day. But I think it's going to be an important topic. So I just wanted to point you in that direction. Take a look at that. What we found and the perception is really, really interesting. Okay, so why are we actually here today? Well, we're not here at all to talk about cheating and corruption perspective. What we are here to talk about is, in fact, the generational support for public funding of facilities by the type of facility. Okay, dumb that down. So, do the local residents support using public dollars to fund new facilities? I think that's a question that we all know is really relevant as we're in the middle of this arms race for not only professional but also youth and amateur sporting facilities. So let's take a look at it. What we did in the bar chart is a little bit different here. You're used to seeing generations broken down, but this one we did a side by side comparison. And the green or tealish bars, those are support for public funding of youth and amateur sporting facilities. Okay. Now, if we toggle that off, we see the yellow, and the yellow is support for public funding for professional sports facility development. So we've got both of them side by side here, and there's a few things that I want to point out right off the top. The first one, if we just take a look at the green, right, we're just looking at this is again support by generation for public dollars to be used to build youth and amateur. We see a really, really high mark in terms of support. Actually, if you average all those out, it's 76% support across all generations for youth and amateur. Think multi-field, multi-court, multi-diamond, the multi-use sports complexes that we see cropping up all over the United States. Those are those types of facilities and venues. Now, if we switch gears and we flip-flop it to look at just support for public dollars used to build professional sporting facilities, we see still pretty high support, but holy cow, do we see a drop off as the generations increase in age, with boomers all the way down to 36%. So the average support across all of these sits right at about 55%. And when we look at the difference between the two, we're looking at both youth and amateur and professional sporting facilities. Again, the public support for public funding for those facilities, we see there's about a 22% average gap between the two. But what's really interesting is this gap right here in boomers, right? And again, we put generational information up there for your convenience, but boomers are those people that are age 60 to 78 right now. And we've got almost a 50, or I'm sorry, over a 50% gap from 75% support to 36% support between youth and amateur and professional sporting facilities. So what that tells us is the boomers are, 75% favorable toward using public dollars for youth and amateur. But when it comes to using public funds to build professional sporting facilities, their support drastically reduces, down to almost a third, which seems incredibly low. Now, as we move towards those younger generations, so Gen X, millennials, and down to Gen Z, we see overall kind of higher support, with millennials really taking the top spot in terms of overall support for both youth and amateur and pro sports facilities being funded by public dollars. And all in all, I think this is really, really good news. But the millennials are the strongest. We do start to see this tailing off just a little bit here in the Gen Zs. We've got 72% support using public dollars to fund youth and amateur facilities, and we're down to 62%, so a 10% differential when it comes to their support for pro facility development using public funds. So what does all this mean? It means that priorities shift with age. There's no doubt about that. We've touched on that in some of our other generational deep dives here as well when we look at travel patterns and things of that nature. We also see that if we frame things around the youth and amateur, youth and local, we might even say, we can drive support. We're driving very high levels of support, again, on average around 76%. And really what we're getting at here is that this bridging these generational gaps for long-term, long-lasting buy-in. What we need to realize as those who may be responsible for, charting an initiative to develop a new facility or venue, is that the older the generation is, particularly when it comes to those pro sports venues, the lower the support for using public dollars to build them is. So we need to make sure that we're aware of what our community is interested in achieving through those venues. Right now, we're sitting on a high, I would say, in terms of the support for the youth and amateur facility. That is of no surprise given what we're seeing on that kind of arms race right now. Now, what does all this mean for you in the sport and tourism industry? Well, if you're in the middle of the facilities fray, you need to know what residents think. We can help you with that. We can actually take this data and localize it to your local market. So if you are even exploring a new facility development in your community, we can give you some insights to say, hey, here's what your local populace will think of that based upon the venue in general, the new facility in general, and how you might be looking to fund it, whether that's through public dollars or otherwise. We can compare that to this national benchmark set. Number two, we've got to pay attention to Gen Z. We see this little tailing off here, and I feel like every time we do one of these deep dives on the resident sentiment data and we talk about it from a generational perspective, we say, what's going on with Gen Z? Well, it's no different right here. They could just not quite be there yet to understand that impact. Again, we issued this survey to folks that are 18 and over. Or are they possibly giving us some indicators of what their future consumer behavior and future resident sentiment and perceptions of the things that we do in our communities might be? I don't know the answer to that yet. I will tell you, this is the first time we've gone out for this level of data when it comes to public dollars being used for facility development, but we are currently in the field right now on the next iteration of this. So the longer we do that longitudinal, it's called in research language, the longer we do that, the more insights we're going to be able to glean. We're going to be able to see trends emerge over time. So again, we're watching Gen Z like a hawk on all these areas, and public dollars supporting facility development is no different. And then the last thing here, number three, is, just as cost associated with these facilities goes up, particularly what we see in the professional development side. And let's be honest, costs are increasing on the youth and amateur, the multi-sport facility development side as well. We're likely to see some of these things shift. Now, I'm not saying that it'll necessarily be decreased support, but one could have a hunch that over here on the boomers and the Gen X's, kind of decreased support, still moderately high for Gen Xers, but certainly a lot lower for boomers in terms of support for public dollars to be used for professional venues. You can see that there could be a correlation there when it comes to the sheer cost of these things. I mean, we've seen, although it was privately funded, SoFi Stadium, $5.5 billion. I've said this before, but facility development typically comes in these cycles, these 20 to 30 year facility lifespan cycles when it's the next greatest thing. We're right in the middle of one of those waves right now. This is no surprise, but what is different is just the sheer cost of those things, where it used to be 30 million, I don't even know the numbers. We're up to hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars to build these new facilities, but we're still seeing folks do them. On the professional side, when you look at the NFL, you've obviously got the Bills right now, you've got the Titans, you've got a lot of players around the periphery, your Clevelands, your Chicagos, your Denvers, and many others who are starting to get in that game. We're right in the wave of that cycle. When it comes to youth and amateur, I've said it before and I'll say it again. That is an arms race now. It's primarily funded through private equity. And I do see that reaching a saturation point probably in a few years. Some things to consider on that is, overall population density. We see population deficit occurring going forward. So things like that, as the private equity money rolls in, there's always a massive consolidation and then sort of a resetting of the industry. And I expect that to happen as well. After all, we can't have competing facilities and venues, every 10 miles down the road at every single town. So I urge really good prudence and diligence when you do feasibility and when you're even just starting to explore what it might look like in your community for developing a new facility. Again, we can help you along the way. We can break down this information regarding specific public funding support for facility development, as well as overall, what your local residents think about the events taking place in their community. How much is too much? What benefits they want out of it? All of that is what we offer in our custom resident sentiment work. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have an interest in that or are interested in diving into any more of this data. We'll be hitting up additional fresh cuts of this stuff. As I said, we've got a whole bulk of new data coming down the line that I'm excited to dive into. You know me, I'm a nerd. So when that stuff starts rolling in, I can't wait to put my elbow grease behind it and see what the data says. So until next time, thanks for diving in. Here's a little glimpse of the generational support of public funds to be used for facility development. I hope this helps you in your market, and have a great one.